Welcome, Doomtown fans, to my review of the latest Saddlebag expansion, Dirty Deeds. In the first part of this video, we're going to look at the new outfits as well as the dudes that are in the pack. Part 2, we'll look at all the rest of the cards. We're going to kick it off with 3 new outfits, each for a different faction, and the first one that we're looking at is for the Bandits. This is 108 Worldly Desires. It's got 19 starting Ghost Rock, 3 income. It has repeat react. After you draw a draw hand, if you have the lowest Ghost Rock among all players, draw an additional card into your draw hand and then discard a card. You can only use this ability once per draw hand. So this is the second of the Bandits cards that we've seen with this lowest Ghost Rock sort of effect. Remember, we had a dude, Natalia, that also benefited from having the lowest Ghost Rock among the players. That seems to be a mechanic that is fitting in this faction. Now this ability, you're going to be able to use it every draw hand, and that's going to include low ball. So you're going to be able to use this on low ball as long as you have the lowest Ghost Rock, and then you're going to be able to use it again if you get into a shootout. Because of the nature of this ability, we're almost certainly going to be playing a shootout-oriented deck with this outfit power. It's not only going to help us win low ball so that we get priority with shootout effects, but it's also going to improve the quality of our shootout hands. That might allow us to skimp a little bit on our draw structure, or it just might allow us to more consistently draw into our powerful draw structure. This is certainly way different than the original outfit power for this faction, and I think it's probably going to produce a more aggressive, a little bit more shootout-oriented deck, which I think is pretty cool given that there's a lot of precedent there with all this kung fu stuff. We can certainly see some pretty interesting things going on from a shooter deck in this faction. The next outfit is for the Eagle Wardens. This is Beyond the Veil. It's a 19 with +3. While your dudes are at a deed with a totem, they have +1 influence. Then it has Noon Boot. Boot a totem you control to move one of your dudes to its location. Again, here's a very different outfit from the original. The original outfit is all about town square control. A lot of the builds I've seen kind of devolve into really strong shooter decks, either with like Deadmans or with some sort of really strong draw structure that they eventually get into. They're acing lots of cards with the outfit power. This to me seems pretty different. It's going to be a little more Dudes and Deeds-esque, a lot more playing down deeds to develop your income and then protecting them with the totems. Now it's worth noting that we don't have a ton of totems at the moment. There are 4 of them total, and while there are definitely good effects in the mix, I think that we're probably going to want a few more options before this outfit really takes off. This +1 influence thing is really, really strong, especially if we can pull it off routinely early in the game. But in order to do that, we're going to have to play a deed and then also attach a totem to it. Now that's certainly not impossible, but it's going to require that we build our deck with lots of deeds and lots of these totems if we want to be able to get this influence bonus in the first couple of turns where it's going to matter a lot. So I see this as being a reasonably powerful outfit. You're definitely going to have to build your whole deck around the idea of capitalizing on it, but it certainly seems like a change of pace for the Eagle Wardens. The last outfit is the one that I'm the most excited about. This is Morgan Stables. It's an 18 with 3 income. Reduce the cost of the first horse you play each turn by 1 Ghost Rock. Then it has React Boot. After you complete a Noon or Shootout ability that moved one of your dudes, draw a card and discard a card. Make another play or pass. If you are not in a shootout, the play cannot be acted. Let's talk a little bit about this React Boot ability first. The biggest thing that I'm seeing with this is that we're going to be able to use it to like Pinto into the fight and then immediately make another shootout play. So in that way, it's going to kind of turn one of our horses into Shadow Walk, and we're also going to get to cycle this card, drawing and then discarding. Now, the biggest thing that you can do with that, in my opinion, is use some of the powerful guns, especially Acid Coil Gun. I think Acid Coil Gun and kind of a gadget-oriented version of this deck is probably going to be the way to go. We're going to be able to use horses to move our dudes around, our powerful fighters, and then we're going to be able to essentially shadow walk in and immediately fire one of these weapons. We could also maybe use Shotgun. I think that's another reasonably good way to abuse this. We could also just build our deck with strong shootout action cards, so that then we can use the horse to get in there and then have priority to fire off one of our powerful cards from hand. We might also use abilities attached to our dudes. The best one that I can come up with on first pass is Nathan Shane. This would be a pretty cool way to get in there with the horse ability and then immediately look at their hand and take an important action card, especially like a Cheatin' Punisher or some sort of play that they were going to use against you, like an unprepared or a faster on the draw, something like that. The other part of this outfit power is also pretty good. The cost reduction for a horse. That's probably going to save us maybe 3-4 Ghost Rock in a game. But the big thing that I'm seeing is that it's going to allow us to more rapidly play out our hand, especially early in the game. And that's going to just let you draw more cards, find deeds quicker, and build up your income. So being able to play down these horses, ensuring that we'll get to draw another card at the end of the turn, seems to be a pretty good thing about this outfit power. I'm definitely really excited about this. I think it pushes a more horse-oriented strategy, one that's using horses and some of the tactical action cards associated with horses. Seems like a way to go. I also think the gadget version that's maybe clubless or very low clubs could also be very strong. So I think that there's definitely some options for strong combat-oriented decks that require a little setup, but once they get there, they can do really powerful things. Now we're getting into the dudes, and the first one that we have is Xang Fang. She's a 2 of spades. She's 3 draw, 0 influence, 2 to play with 2 upkeep. She's transient and an abomination. After she enters play, gain Ghost Rock to the production at her location. If this is a deed you do not own or your home, reduce that card's production until after the next upkeep phase. I'm a bit conflicted here. On one hand, I think that there's a kind of cool play with this card with Stagecoach Office. If we have control of one of our opponent's deeds, we can use Stagecoach Office to bring her in play there, and then we'd be able to use her react ability to get the production of that deed, and it would also allow us to leave, and then our opponent would not get the production next turn. Outside of that play, she doesn't seem all that great to me. If you're reducing your income of your own home, you're just going to basically get next turn's income now. I guess maybe that could be alright, but you just spent 2 on this dude, you've got this 2 upkeep to worry about next turn, she's not even worth an influence. I'm not crazy about this dude. I think if you have a really specific use for her, she could be decent, but otherwise I'm pretty iffy on her. The next dude is also for the bandits. This is He Fang. He's a 10 of spades, 1 stud, 1 influence, 4 to play with 1 upkeep. He's Bless 0 and Kung Fu 0. He has Noon Boot. Play a non-gadget abomination from your hand at this location, reducing its cost by 2. This dude has some obvious synergy with the dude we just looked at. You're going to be able to play her down, doing basically the Stagecoach Office play I was just talking about. The biggest thing that I'm excited about with this dude, though, is the Blessed. The fact that we now see that the bandits are going to have a little bit of the Blessed in the same way that we see Sloan have a little bit of the Hex Slinging. This has some decent synergy with Hamshanks as well, who's another abomination dude that we can play with this. You're going to have to boot He Fang in order to use this ability, and Hamshanks is going to come into play and maybe protect him a little bit, making your opponent have to use the abilities on Hamshanks first. kind of interesting. I don't know, this guy's not blowing my mind. He's kind of a high value, so you're probably going to have to start him if you want him to work with Kung Fu. He's only worth 1 influence. This is not an amazing dude, but I think he could fit in to the right strategy. The next dude is for the Eagle Wardens. Her name is Caba Hakuri. She's a 3 of spades, 1 draw, 1 influence, 3 to play with 1 upkeep. Shaman 2. Once per turn, she can use a noon ability on an unbooted totem in an adjacent location. This is potentially a decent starter for Beyond the Veil, though I think there's some pretty obvious limitations here. First of all, if you're going to play this card at all, it's going to have to be your starter. This 3 is going to cause you to fail pulls. I don't think there's too many decks that are going to be able to make the pull at 3. There's also the complication that one of the better effects, the Fire of Nana Bozo, is only going to work if we can make a 10 pull. And that's going to mean 8 or higher with a Shaman 2. That's pretty constraining as a deck building principle. So I think that this is a decent dude. I think it's possible to use her well, but it's going to be tricky and it's going to involve some deck building. The next dude is also for the Eagle Wardens. This is Zachary Deloria. He's a 9 of spades, 0 stud, 0 influence, 4 to play with no upkeep. If you are an Eagle Wardens player, he has a bullet bonus equal to the highest influence among your dudes at his location. Here's another pretty decent dude that could maybe be a starter. We have lots of high influence dudes within the Eagle Wardens faction, and we especially have lots of 2 and 3 influence dudes that can probably make it into our starting posse. So this guy, if he's fighting in the same location as those dudes, is going to be probably 2-3 stud. That's pretty good. He's also only 4 of your starting Ghost Rock with no upkeep, so it seems to me like he would fit into starting posses pretty easily. I like this guy with Marcia Ridge, who's a big incentive for controlling the town square, and that's just kind of a theme of the original outfit power for this faction. This guy could work pretty well there. If you're piling all your dudes into your town square, he's going to be able to get a bullet bonus. So I don't know, I think it might be worth including this guy in a starting posse if you already have plenty of influence to begin with. He's not going to eat up a lot of your Ghost Rock, and him being a stud definitely fits one of the gaps of this faction's starting dudes. The next dude is for the 4th ring. This is Odit. He's a 5 of spades, 1 stud, 0 influence, 4 to play with no upkeep. He's an abomination. While all of your dudes in play are abominations, he has +3 influence. This guy is a big step in the right direction for Oddities of Nature. One of the big problems with Oddities of Nature is that you have a lot of low influence or mostly no influence dudes. So if you don't have control of the town square, if you can't get your guys there, you're not going to have a lot of influence, and it can be really volatile. You can lose the game very easily because it's difficult for you to generate influence outside of the town square. Here's going to be a way that you can just start a 3 influence 4 cost dude who is also a stud. And I don't think it's really going to be much of a requirement for you to start all abominations. You're definitely doing that anyway. So just sticking this guy into an Oddities of Nature starting posse is going to be really solid. I think one of the biggest limitations for this guy is just that he's not really going to work outside of that deck. I don't see you really wanting to play this guy in a conventional 4th ring deck. You're definitely going to be starting a huckster guy that's probably not an abomination. And a lot of the run-of-the-mill starters like Jake Smiley aren't really going to interact well with this guy. You're going to have to lose them before you get this influence bonus potentially. So I see this guy as being only in Oddities of Nature, but he's going to be a really good starter dude there. He is a stud, and he's just going to be worth a ton of influence. Next up, we have a dude for the Law Dogs. This is Eric Samson. He's a 6 of spades, 2 draw, 1 influence, 3 to play with 1 upkeep. He's blessed 0. While he has a mystical good, he has +1 influence, and while he has a melee weapon, he's a stud. This guy might not seem like a whole lot, but I'm really excited about this guy. First of all, we're going to see 2 weapons later in the pack that are melee and mystical. So obviously if you can play mystical melee weapons on this dude, it's going to work out pretty well. This also could potentially work well with some of the existing builds of Blessed Law Dogs. Some of the things I see is he's a 6, so he's going to be on value with things like faster on the draw. He's also blessed, so it could potentially interact well with Abram's Crusaders if you turn him into a deputy with the outfit power. This guy's just a cheap dude who has reasonably decent stats to begin with, and if you have mystical melee weapons as an option, he's going to be 2 influence and 2 stud for 3 cost. That's pretty good. I definitely think this guy's going to see some play in some of the existing Blessed Law Dogs builds, either out of the Abrams Crusaders like I was talking about, or maybe out of the Arsenal. The next dude is for Morgan Cattleco. This is Dr. Brian Foxworth. He's a 5 of spades, 0 draw, 2 influence. He's 3 to play with 1 upkeep. While he is unbooted and has no cards attached, he cannot be called out in the town square. Then he has React. Before taking casualties, discard Brian to reduce your casualties by his influence. This guy's kind of interesting, but I'm not really seeing the appeal. This React thing, to me, seems like it's going to be extremely difficult to get value out of. You're going to reduce your casualties by 2, potentially more if his influence is higher. But reducing casualties by 2, you could just ace a dude to do that. And I think a lot of times I would rather ace a dude than lose a 2 influence dude. Obviously there's exceptions to that, and maybe in situations where you have like one really important dude that you don't want to lose, Brian's ability could be useful here. Now this can't call out thing, that's also really powerful and interesting, but I don't see a whole lot you can do with it. Maybe you can camp in the town square and call out a dude who moves to the town square, especially in like the horse-oriented deck. You could, call out, then ride a horse into the fight and fire it, maybe out of the Morgan stables. This guy might also be decent in a landslide-style deck just as a 3-cost, 2-influence dude. I don't know, I'm not really seeing the use of this guy. I don't think he's bad, I'm just a bit puzzled as to the best use of him. The next dude is for the Sloan Gang. This is Buford Hurley. He's a 3 of spades, 3 draw, 0 influence, he's 1 to play and 1 upkeep. While he is at a saloon or casino, reduce his upkeep and the production of the deed by 1. This is going to fit right in with some of the existing Sloan Gang decks. He's a really cheap 3-bullet dude. He's also at 3 value, so he's going to fit in with a lot of draw structures like the shotgun-oriented draw structures. This thing with the saloons and casinos is pretty cool as well. If you put him on your opponent's deeds that are those types, you can reduce their production and also save yourself money on his upkeep. So that's going to benefit playing him down and being aggressive, which he's going to be well suited for since he's a cheap kind of disposable guy. The next dude is neutral. This is Doris Powell. She's a 10 of spades, 0 draw, 2 influence. She's 4 to play with 2 upkeep. At the end of the turn, or if Doris is ever at home, she loses all of her control points. And whenever Doris moves to an in-town deed without booting, she gains a control point to a maximum of 3. This is a really, really cool dude. Basically, we've got an incredibly weak combatant who has an ability that is going to allow us to temporarily get some control points, and that might push us towards winning or threaten victory and force our opponent to play differently. But in order to get those control points, we're going to have to do some funky stuff. She's going to need some way to move to multiple in-town deeds without booting, and that's almost certainly going to require some sort of horse or equipment, Mechanical Horse is probably the easiest example since you can just pay Ghost Rock a few times to scooter around the board. We could also use the Bandit's outfit power, or maybe like some dude abilities that move our guys around. This is a really sweet design. I like this a lot. She's going to be hard to use in order to get more than like 1 or 2 control points. 1 seems pretty easy because she could just move to Town Square and then move to an in-town deed. But from there, it gets a little tricky. You're going to require equipment. And she's still going to be a reasonably decent dude, even if you're not trying to threaten the victory, because she's just a 4-drop 2 influence. I really like this design. The last dude is Rico Rodigan. He's a Queen of Spades, 0 draw, 1 influence. He's 3 to play with no upkeep. He's a grifter. He has React Boot. At the start of the game, look at an opponent's hand, place your non-grifter dudes on top of your deck, and return their cost to your stash. Search your deck for up to the same number of starting dudes, and add to your starting gang following the standard setup rules. This is another sweet design. Here's a grifter that's going to let us mulligan our dudes, so that, in other words, after we see what our opponent is playing with their starting posse, we're going to be able to pick out a tailored starting posse to deal with their dudes. And on top of that, he's worth an influence, which is definitely not something we normally see out of these cheap, no upkeep grifters. He's also a queen, so he's going to be a very high value. It means that they could maybe fail some pulls on like paralysis mark and things like that. Despite his strong stats, I'm a little torn on his ability. To me, it seems like losing something like Travis or Gina or like Andrew Burton or whatever your grifter is now that allows you to filter some cards and improve your starting hand. Losing that effect is going to be pretty punishing. And one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of my decks is I don't really change my starting posse all that much. Pretty much the degree to which I change my starting posse is how aggressive I think my opponent's deck is. If I think my opponent's deck is going to come out of the gate with lots of shooters, I'm going to want to play a starting posse that adapts to that. Whereas if I know I'm playing against something that has like a terrible draw structure, I can just start a weaker, less shooting-oriented set of dudes, and that's probably going to mean I have more influence. And I can usually tell that just from their outfit. So I'm going to know if they're playing an aggressive deck just from their outfit. So I don't know how much this additional information is really going to help, how much switching up your gang is really going to help, unless you have like a huge toolbox sort of starting package, which I don't think any deck really has the deck slots to do. So on one hand, this guy is awesome. That influence and the high value is really, really unparalleled in terms of starting grifters. But on the other hand, I don't know if I'm going to want to give up something like Travis or Burton to play this. That's going to do it for part 1 of my Dirty Deeds review. Be sure you tune into part 2. There's a lot of interesting things to look at over there. And if you like the video, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and press the button that looks like a thumbs up. I'll see you over in part 2.